Revenge at Sagittarius A, an original audiobook by Wormhole Dreams. Copyright 2023 Wormhole Dreams, all rights reserved. In the year 2073, the world had changed drastically. Humanity had mastered extreme faster-than-light travel, referred to as EFTL, and ventured into the far reaches of the galaxy. New worlds were discovered, inhabited by species both strange and familiar. Alliances formed between planets, weaving a tapestry of interstellar friendship that spanned across the cosmos. News of an unprecedented mission to Sagittarius buzzed like electric current throughout Earth. The International Space Agency had planned to study the black hole at the center of the Milky Way, something never attempted before. It captured the public's imagination, and the palpable excitement could be felt in every corner of the globe. The ship designated for this historical mission was called the Nomad. Charles McAdams stood on the platform overlooking the gleaming spacecraft. He was a tall, wiry man with graying hair and a quiet demeanor that masked the turmoil within him. His eyes were like dark pools of ink, holding a sorrow so deep it seemed to swallow any glimmer of light. His fingers twitched with anticipation, his heart pounded in his chest. He had worked tirelessly to secure his place on the Nomad's crew. The opportunity consumed him, but not for reasons most would suspect.
"Are you ready for this, Charles?"
asked Garrett Godwin, a systems engineer who Charles met only a few days earlier. Garrett was very outgoing and friendly, and his enthusiastic energy snapped Charles back to reality.
"Absolutely. I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time,"
Charles replied, hiding the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior.
"This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity."
I couldn't agree more. We're making history today.
As the final preparations for launch were made, Grant Hickman arrived. The charismatic and self-absorbed politician was boarding the Nomad for this journey. Hickman, seeing that the polls had him low on supporting the beloved space agency, insisted that he appear to lead the mission. This was just the thing to get him the extra points he needed in the polls to win the presidency. Since Hickman was the political frontrunner, the agency had no choice but to allow him this charade. Since he threatened to cut their budget if they didn't, Hickman was going on the mission to make himself look like a champion of technology and a fearless hero. Just the thing that defined this deeply self-absorbed politician, whose primary concern was not the well-being of the constituents, but rather his own public image. Beneath the facade of a devoted public servant lies a grandstanding egomaniac who always manages to steer the conversation back to his achievements, his leadership, and his vision for the future.
"Here we go,"
Charles whispered to himself, each step bringing him closer to both the black hole and his ultimate goal. The public might have viewed the mission as a grand exploration of the unknown, but for Charles McAdams, it was an opportunity to right a grievous wrong. The sun glinted off the sleek exterior of the Nomad as it towered above the launch pad, casting a long shadow across the bustling crowd. Grant Hickman stood before them at the top of the boarding ramp, his confident posture and piercing gaze projecting an air of authority that demanded attention.
"Today marks a turning point for humanity,"
he began, his voice rich and resonant.
"As your future president, I am proud to lead this groundbreaking mission to Sagittarius A. Like you, the brave citizens of Earth, I too am a child of the stars."
The audience erupted in cheers, waving flags and banners emblazoned with Hickman's name. He reveled in their adulation, drinking in the applause like a parched man at an oasis. As his handlers snapped photos, he smiled broadly, imagining the headlines that would surely follow. "Fearless leader embarks on historic voyage. Mankind's brightest star dares to venture into the unknown."
By exploring the farthest reaches of our galaxy, we will usher in a new era of peace and prosperity. Together, we will forge our destiny among the stars.
His sycophant entourage, standing just behind him, nodded vigorously, their eyes wide with feigned enthusiasm.
"You're doing great, sir. This is exactly what the people need. A fearless hero leading us into the future."
Of course it is, Hickman thought smugly. basking in the glow of his public image. In the privacy of his office, the walls were covered in framed magazine covers and newspaper clippings featuring his face. He had meticulously crafted this moment. It wasn't about space exploration or the well-being of his constituents. It was about winning the presidency, securing his place in history, and feeding his insatiable ego. With one final flourish, he concluded his speech.
I am honored and humbled to stand beside you, the citizens of Earth, as we embark on this extraordinary journey. Godspeed, Nomad.
The applause swelled to a deafening roar as Hickman strode towards the spacecraft, his heart pounding with anticipation. As he climbed the boarding ramp, he paused for a moment, glancing back at the throngs of adoring fans. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for, the grand adventure that would secure his legacy. As the senator entered the ship, he was greeted by Captain Amelia Swanson, a seasoned explorer with a no-nonsense attitude. She was highly respected by her crew for her leadership skills and her ability to make tough decisions under pressure. Captain Swanson was determined to complete the mission to study Sagittarius A and return her crew safely to Earth.
Senator Hickman, welcome aboard,
said the captain, extending a hand in greeting.
Sure.
Hickman replied, barely shaking her hand and not looking at her. As the hatch sealed behind him, Grant Hickman felt a surge of triumph. Charles settled into his station in the engineering room. He couldn't help but feel the gravity of what he was about to do. He knew that his actions would have consequences, but he also knew that was his chance, and it was the only one he would get. This was the right ship, at the right time, with the right people on board. All he had to do was put everything in place during the 7 days it would take for the Nomad to cross 26,000 light-years of space, using its advanced Alcubierre drive system to fold space.
Mr. McAdams, is navigation ready?
Asked Captain Swanson from the captain's chair on the bridge.
The board's green, Captain,
Charles replied.
Mr. Godwin, is the Alcubierre drive ready?
All green, Captain.
Godwin answered.
Very well, start launch sequence.
Captain Swanson pressed a comm button on her panel and opened a ship-wide channel.
This is the captain speaking. We're preparing for departure. As you all know, this is an important mission, and a lot is riding on our success. Know that I have absolute faith in each and every one of you. This mission is not just about the data we collect, it is about the spirit of humanity, reaching out into the cosmos. Trust in your training. Lean on your teammates.
She paused for a moment, looking for the right words.
And stay sharp. Swanson out.
As the Nomad roared to life and began its ascent into the cosmos, Charles steeled himself for the journey ahead. He knew that the path he had chosen was dangerous and uncertain, but he also was convinced that it was the only way to find the justice he so desperately coveted. The fluorescent lights in the engineering room hummed softly, casting a sterile white glow over the maze of displays and machinery. Charles McAdams stared intently at the guidance system computer, his fingers dancing gracefully over the controls.
Charles, I need you to run another diagnostic on guidance.
Captain Swanson said, entering engineering, her voice steady and authoritative. Standing beside Charles, she placed a hand on the technician's shoulder, feeling the tension there.
Of course, Captain,
Charles replied, his voice barely above a whisper. As Charles turned back to the computer, his mind drifted away to the darkness that consumed him. He struggled against it, reminding himself that he needed to keep it together long enough to carry out his plan. But to do this, he would need to access the restricted parts of the computer system, a task he could not work on while the captain was in the room.
Captain, these diagnostics will take a few minutes. Can I get you anything?
Thank you, Charles, but I'm fine. Just let me know when you have the results.
Understood, Captain,
Charles acknowledged, turning back to his work. Garrett caught sight of Charles from across the room. He noticed his trembling hands and the sheen of sweat on his brow. There was something off about him, but he hesitated to say anything. He knew Charles was a private man, so he didn't want to intrude.
Hey, Charles.
He called out tentatively.
How's the guidance system holding up?
It's good,
he muttered, not looking up from his work.
Just loading a software patch.
Sounds good.
Garrett replied slowly, his eyes lingering on Charles for a moment longer before returning to his work. Charles could feel the weight of Garrett's gaze and knew he had to be more careful. He couldn't afford to arouse suspicion now, not when he was so close to accessing the information he needed. He focused on his task, silently repeating the code sequence in his head like a mantra. Navigation, guidance, security override. After 20 minutes, Charles pressed the COM button on his console.
Diagnostic complete, Captain.
Charles announced, relief flooding through him as the screen displayed the results.
Thanks, Charles. Keep an eye on the emergency thrusters. We'll need them at maximum efficiency once we reach Sagittarius A.
Understood, Captain.
Charles replied, his voice a little steadier now. He allowed himself a slight smile. His plan was still in motion, and soon he would have the means to reset the past and find peace once again. Days later, the soft hum of the engines vibrated through the soles of Charles' boots as he stood before the bank of guidance system computers, his fingers tapping out a rhythm on the console. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a sterile glow upon the room, illuminating rows of screens and blinking indicators. He glanced cautiously toward the door, his heart pounding in his chest.
All right, crew.
Captain Swanson's voice boomed over the intercom.
We're halfway to Sagittarius A. Keep monitoring those systems and prepping the sensors. Time for some groundbreaking research.
Craning his neck, Charles could see the other technicians working diligently at their stations, their eyes glued to the various readouts and charts. The air felt heavy with anticipation, each crew member aware of the importance of their mission. The first to study the event horizon of a supermassive black hole up close. But for Charles, there was an added layer of urgency. With each passing moment, he grew more desperate to access the restricted parts of the ship's system.
Hey, Charles!
A voice said suddenly, as Charles nearly jumped out of his skin.
Jesus, Garrett.
He looked up to the engineer standing beside him, brow furrowed.
You scared me.
Sorry, man. Didn't mean to sneak up on you. Just wanted to see if you needed a hand.
No. I'm good. Just wrapping up here.
All right, Charles.
Garrett said, lingering for a moment before finally walking away. Charles let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. That was too close. He waited until Garrett disappeared from view before returning to his task, his fingers trembling as he typed. If only he could crack the code, he would have access to all the Nomad systems.
Finally, that's it.
He whispered under his breath, elation surging through him like an electric current. The restricted areas were now accessible, but there was no time to celebrate. The mission continued, and Charles knew he had to play his part flawlessly.
Nav thrusters adjusted and fully operational,
he reported to the captain.
Copy that, Charles.
As the spacecraft hurtled toward the black hole, Charles felt a newfound determination take root within him. His quest was far from over, but now he had the tools he needed to forge ahead, and nothing would stand in his way. On the 7th day, as the Nomad moved in range of Sagittarius A, Captain Swanson addressed the crew.
Approaching Sagittarius A, prepare for orbital entry.
The comm came alive in engineering with Swanson's voice.
Guidance, double-check our orbital distance from the event horizon. Get us in a safe and stable position for observation.
Preparing guidance for orbital entry,
Charles said, pressing buttons on his console.
Keep us posted on those readings.
Understood, Captain.
His fingers danced over the controls, each precise movement designed to lead them closer to the edge of the abyss.
Guidance confirms orbit established. Nomad is 2,000 kilometers from the event horizon.
Charles informed the captain, struggling to keep the tremor from his voice.
Good job, everyone. Now let's get those sensors online and begin collecting data.
Only a few minutes passed when Hickman burst onto the bridge, his eyes gleaming with unbridled ambition. The air hummed with anticipation as he beckoned to his cameraman, who followed him like a shadow, lens trained on his every move. Captain Swanson observed the scene with narrowed eyes, tension pulsing beneath her calm exterior.
Captain!
Hickman's voice boomed through the room like thunder, his arms spread wide in an exaggerated gesture of camaraderie.
We've arrived at Sagittarius A, have we not?
Indeed, we have.
Captain Swanson confirmed, her tone measured and even.
We're in a stable orbit at 2,000 kilometers from the event horizon.
Excellent!
Hickman exclaimed, turning to address his camera operator with practiced ease.
Our journey to the edge of this black hole is a testament to the power of human ingenuity and resilience. My policies and unwavering support for space exploration have made this mission possible.
As the politician spoke, Captain Swanson clenched her jaw, struggling to maintain her composure. She knew all too well that it was the efforts of the engineers, scientists, and crew members aboard the Nomad that had brought them to this moment, not Hickman's empty promises.
Cut!
Hickman barked, his mask of confidence slipping for a brief moment. He shot a nervous glance at the captain.
You said safe distance, Captain. Are we, safe out here?
Mr. Hickman, we are currently in a stable orbit around the black hole, which means that we're maintaining a safe distance from the event horizon.
Event horizon?
Hickman queried, his brow furrowing in confusion.
Think of it like the point of no return. Once an object crosses the event horizon, it cannot escape the immense gravitational pull of the black hole. The object would be stretched into an infinitely long, thin strand known as a spaghettification.
Spaghettification?
Hickman's voice quivered with apprehension. In that moment, he seemed less like an all-powerful politician and more like a child frightened by the unknown.
That's not all,
Swanson said, deciding to have fun at Hickman's expense.
Even before we get to close for spaghettification, time would dilate.
And what does that mean?
Depending on our distance, if we get too close, time will slow down for us. However, back on Earth, it will rapidly accelerate. If we are in the wrong position relative to the event horizon, we could return to Earth hundreds of years in the future, even though we were only away for 3 weeks.
Hickman swallowed hard.
Captain, please tell me there's no chance of that.
Swanson's posture turned serious.
Our guidance systems are functioning optimally, and all readings indicate we're at a safe distance. Don't worry yourself, Senator.
Okay, that's a relief.
Hickman swallowed hard, his composure returning as he straightened his suit jacket.
Well then, carry on, Captain.
As Hickman retreated to his quarters, all Captain Swanson could do was roll her eyes. Several of the bridge crew snickered. The Nomad's bridge was a symphony of beeping and tapping as the crew worked with precision, their eyes fixed on the instruments before them. 45 minutes had passed since they reached the edge of the black hole, Sagittarius A, and the air was filled with equal parts anticipation and anxiety.
Captain Swanson, if I may,
Grant Hickman said, returning to the bridge with a cameraman in tow.
I'd like to get more footage of this momentous accomplishment.
Amelia gritted her teeth, her fingers drumming on her chair's armrest.
Senator, now is not the time. My crew needs to focus on their tasks.
Ah, but Captain, my committee approves funding for your agency, does it not? I'm sure you would not want to be responsible for budget cutbacks in the future, right?
The threat hung in the air and Amelia clenched her jaw but said nothing. With a nod at his cameraman, Hickman began speaking into the lens.
Today marks a historic day for mankind as the Nomad reaches the very precipice of the unknown.
He paused, allowing his words to sink in. Amelia stared at him, her thoughts a mix of frustration and resentment. She knew he saw this mission as a stepping stone to the presidency, caring little for the scientific and historical significance, the true purpose of the Nomad. Hickman started to speak again, but was cut off. Suddenly, Garrett Godwin burst onto the bridge in full stride, half out of breath from running.
Captain,
he said, his face pale and his breathing heavy.
We're too close to the event horizon. We have to move back now.
Garrett, what are you talking about?
She said, eyeing her crew for confirmation. They all shook their heads in disagreement. One of the bridge officers spoke up.
All systems are normal, Captain. We are in the edge of the accretion disk 2,000 kilometers from the event horizon.
Captain, I swear, I manually checked it in engineering. Something's wrong.
Garrett insisted, his eyes wide with fear. Captain Swanson quickly turned to her console. Her fingers flew across it as she accessed the ship's computer with her personal code. She clenched her jaw to steady her nerves. The crew watched in tense silence. their earlier confidence wavering under Garrett's insistence that they were in danger.
Computer, what is our distance from the event horizon of Sagittarius A?
Current distance 800 kilometers.
Oh shit.
Swanson gasped. They were too close, far closer than they'd intended. They now found themselves in the perilous zone of time dilation, where minutes on the Nomad could mean years back on Earth.
Helm, back us away from the event horizon, full speed now.
She turned back to the computer screen, her words measured.
Computer, why are our instruments not reflecting this distance?
An authorized program is running on top of the guidance system, reporting an incorrect position to the bridge.
Who authorized this?
She demanded, anger flaring within her. The entire mission was compromised, and someone aboard her ship was responsible. After a painful silence, a voice came from behind them.
I did it. I put us here.
Charles said, standing at the entrance to the bridge. His usually quiet demeanor had taken on a cold, steely edge. All eyes on the bridge turned to Charles.
You? Why would you do this?
Revenge.
Revenge? For what?
I'm here to avenge the murder of my daughter.
Who on my ship had anything to do with your daughter's death?
Captain Swanson inquired, her face now twisted with more confusion.
Him.
Charles said coldly, pointing at Hickman, who had been standing silently with fear painted across his face. One of the bridge crew interrupted.
Captain, we are clear of the accretion disk. We are now 5,000 kilometers from the event horizon.
Hearing this, Garrett quickly ran over to a bridge terminal and started typing on the screen.
What the hell are you talking about? I don't know you or your daughter.
Hickman insisted.
Like many of history's most efficient killers, you didn't need to know her, but you definitely murdered her.
Hickman turned to the captain, pointing at Charles.
Captain, this man is obviously insane.
5 years ago, Hickman was the leader of the Senate Armed Service Committee. He pushed through a bill to arm rebels in a small South American country. My daughter was there as a humanitarian worker, dedicated to helping those in need. But once the rebels were armed, they turned their weapons on innocent villagers, killing indiscriminately in their quest for power. You were warned by others in Congress about the danger of arming that group, but you ignored it. You're too arrogant to take advice from those who knew the situation better than you. My daughter was executed with a group of civilians, her life snuffed out in an instant because of your thoughtless political games.
Hickman pointed a finger at Charles.
I was cleared of any involvement. That incident was not my fault.
You're an expert in public relations. You managed to shift the blame and evade responsibility, just as you always do.
The captain interrupted.
Charles, I can understand your anger, but what is the point of all of this? Why did you move the ship so close to the event horizon?
With an evil grin, Charles glared at the senator.
Because now, Hickman, your daughter is also dead.
What do you mean by that, you son of a bitch?
Hickman shot back.
Captain, you need to see this.
Garrett called out from the terminal.
We've got a big problem.
Captain Swanson now showing signs of stress.
What? What is the problem now?
Garrett looked up from the terminal screen.
We were 800 kilometers away from the event horizon for 50 minutes. At 1,200 kilometers, we would experience a 10% time dilation. At 800, it's exponentially worse.
How bad is it?
He looked up from the screen at the captain and bridge crew with shock in his eyes.
1 hour at 800 kilometers. I estimate that around 200 years has passed on Earth.
The bridge fell silent. The crew was stunned, some unable to process the information.
You see, Hickman, now your daughter is dead, just like mine.
You bastard! I'll see you get the death penalty for this.
You can push me out the airlock right now if you want. I've accomplished the one thing that mattered. I killed your daughter, but I didn't take her life like you did my daughter. No, I took you away from her. I didn't recklessly unleash murderous rebels to kill innocent people. I weaponized the event horizon of a black hole. You might get back to Earth in a week, Hickman, but you will never see your daughter again.
A week later, the bright morning sun shone down on the steps of the Capitol building, casting sharp shadows on its gleaming white marble. Hickman straightened his tie and strode up the steps with all the pomp and fake humility he had always been known for. He couldn't wait to revel in the adoration of the public once more.
Excuse me.
he said, tapping a young woman on the shoulder as she hurried past him.
I'm Grant Hickman. Where can I find the office of the Majority Leader of the Senate?
The woman burst into laughter, clutching her sides.
That's the best joke I've heard all day. Nice one.
She walked away, still chuckling, leaving Hickman dumbfounded.
Wait, what?
He muttered under his breath, attempting to flag down another passerby.
I'm Grant Hickman. Can you please direct me to the Majority Leader's office?
Sure thing, Grant Hickman.
The man replied, rolling his eyes.
And I'm Chairman Mao Zedong. Seriously, your parents must have had a bad sense of humor naming you after that scumbag Hickman.
Hickman's face fell, his confusion turning to anger. How could they not recognize him? He was one of the most influential politicians of his time.
What do you know about Grant Hickman?
He demanded.
Come on, man, is this a joke? Where are the cameras?
Just tell me what you know, please. It's important.
The man rolled his eyes, then said,
History remembers him as the worst politician ever. His policies almost destroyed the planet and led to World War III. The world is just now recovering from his blunders. Hell, the man is held in the same light as Adolf Hitler.
God, no. This can't be true. No, 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 no.
In a final, desperate attempt to salvage some semblance of dignity, Hickman searched for information on his daughter. To his surprise, she had thrived without him. She had overcome her depression, married, and started a family of her own. By all accounts, she lived a happy and fulfilled life. Across town, Charles stood on the rooftop of a 30-story building overlooking the city, feeling totally empty inside. As he stood on the edge of the towering building, the bitter wind whispered tales of regret and despair. The weight of his actions pressed heavily on his shoulders, a burden too great for one man to bear. His journey had been one of vengeance, a quest fueled by the searing pain of losing his beloved daughter. In his desperate pursuit of retribution, he ruined Senator Hickman and took his daughter from him. And yet, his pain remained, now even more intense. With each passing second, the city below seemed to shrink, and the abyss before him widened. As he jumped to his death, a desperate plea for redemption echoed through the hollow chambers of his heart, while the city held its breath, as if time itself hung in the balance. End of Revenge at Sagittarius A, an original audiobook by Wormhole Dreams. Copyright 2023 Wormhole Dreams, all rights reserved.